Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is pushing her pipeline proposal, with the province spending $14 million on designing a plan to bring to the federal government. We're asking you, what do you think of Alberta's proposal and BC's stance? What place do pipelines have in BC's future? Plus, there's a glut of 2,500 newly built condos going unsold in Metro Vancouver. We'll hear from the BC Real Estate Association, and we're asking you, is the condo market becoming more attainable to you? What's holding buyers back right now? I'm Michelle Elliott. Welcome to BC Today. And thanks for joining us on CBC Radio, CBC Television, and we're live streaming as well. And you can call us now. What place do pipelines have in BC's future? What do you think of Alberta's pipeline proposal and BC's opposition to it? You can give us a call, 604-669-3733 or 1-800-825-5950. You can just hit pound 690 on your cell phone, or you can email us bctoday@cbc.ca. You can leave a comment on our TikTok Live as well. And as we have been covering since yesterday here on the show, the Government of Alberta is moving on its intentions to build a bitumen pipeline to BC's northwest coast. It is spending $14 million to fund the design of a plan. Well, there is technical support from 3 private energy companies. The project itself has no private proponent as of yet. And BC Premier David Eby said it's not a real project because of that, unless Alberta and Ottawa spent taxpayers' money to build it. Eby urged Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to be more transparent with her government's plan. Now, Smith was eager to address British Columbians on the early edition this morning, and host Stephen Quinn asked her about her approach to the project and her response to Eby's calls for transparency.
Well, when you have an emissions cap, like the federal government does, a tanker ban, like the federal government does, a greenwashing bill that makes it illegal to talk about emissions reduction and other environmental improvements, you've got a lot of the producers saying, you know what, we just don't know if we'll be able to expand production under these conditions. So this is why when I've been talking with the Prime Minister and talking about a grand bargain, it's got 3 parts to it. One is building a bitumen pipeline to the northwest BC coast so that we have access to new markets in a significant way. We also then would pair that with the Pathways project, which is a decarbonization project. The oil sands companies want to be carbon neutral by 2050. So we hope that addresses many of the environmental concerns that have been raised. And then the third aspect is we've got to fix the 9 bad laws that have impaired the investment climate. So that's what I'm working with the Prime Minister on. And we're prepared to walk with the private sector every step of the way to make sure that Indigenous consultation is done right, that there are equity partners from Indigenous communities from the outset, and that we can work together to determine the route and get it built.
So I guess what you're trying to accomplish here then is to jump most of the hurdles that the private sector would normally be encountering if it were their proposal, to get to the point where you have those hurdles removed, and then you think the private sector will jump in then.
Correct. I mean, I think that's what we've seen in other jurisdictions. I would say that this is the big challenge for Canada, is we've got to improve the investment climate so that we attract back that investment capital that has been chased away by comments that have been anti-development for so many years. We estimate that there's some $500 billion worth of investment capital that would have been invested in Canada that went elsewhere, mostly the United States, but also around the world. So there is private capital to be had, but we actually have to act like Team Canada, not just mouth nice words. We have to act like Team Canada, and that means supporting each other's projects. So we're going to be the catalyst, and we fully expect that if we can get everybody on board with understanding how important this is as a nation-building exercise for all of us, that we'll be able to attract the private capital. There's no secret plan to try to get the federal government to pay for it. The secret plan is let's get everybody in agreement on this so that we can get the private capital to come back in.
That is Alberta Premier Danielle Smith speaking on the early edition this morning. We requested BC Premier David Eby to join us. He was unavailable. We're asking you, what do you think of Alberta's plan for a bitumen pipeline to BC's northwest coast? What do you think of BC's stance on it, that it's not a real project, given no private backer at the moment? And what do you think What place do you think pipelines have in BC's future? You can call us now. Just hit pound 690 on your cell phone or 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, And you can just hit pound 690 as well. Email bctoday@cbc.ca or leave a comment on our TikTok live. And we have made many calls on this, including to Prince Rupert's Mayor Herb Pond this morning for what this might mean for his community in northern BC. He was unavailable to join us, and we're hoping to speak with him at another time. Right now, I'm joined by Andrew Gage. He's a staff lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law. Good afternoon, Andrew.
Good afternoon.
How viable do you think this plan is right now?
Well, I mean, the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion could only go forward with huge taxpayer subsidies and with the federal government actually buying the pipeline. And we're now looking at a project that's over $30 billion, much of that ultimately going to be paid for by taxpayers. Pipelines are part of the economy of the past. We need to move forward to an economy that puts the health and safety of our children first, a electrical economy, not a let's burn the last of the dirty oil and gas and coal that we can get out of the ground. The Premier of Alberta is simply moving in the wrong direction in our view.
Is that direction one that the Prime Minister is more open to? She said yesterday that following her calls with Prime Minister Mark Carney, that she was more optimistic than she had been in a while. And we have heard, from the Prime Minister that he wants Canada to be this superpower, this energy superpower, given the economic challenges that this country is facing right now.
Well, it's disappointing that the Prime Minister hasn't been clear on that. 10 years ago, when he was the governor of the Bank of England and addressing investors, he told them that this type of investment in fossil fuel infrastructure was a dead end, and that they faced the possibility of stranded assets, the possibility of lawsuits blocking them. And so it's disappointing that he's taking maybe what seems like a politically easier stance now, but one which I think is not telling the truth to Canadians, or for that matter, to the Premier of Alberta.
I'd like to ask you then about the stance from the BC Premier, David Eby, and we also spoke on CBC with Energy Minister Adrian Dix, and his position is it's not really worth talking about right now because he says it's not a real project, given that there is no private proposal. What is the message you want to hear from them? Would you want to know what is your stance on any kind of bitumen pipeline to BC's coast?
I mean, I think the Premier Eby is not wrong, but he's also taking sort of a somewhat a stance that really doesn't grapple with the enormity of the challenges we have in Canada. We have the opportunity to build a nation, to do nation building that actually moves us towards a sustainable future. Recently, the International Court of Justice said that governments that are expanding fossil fuel infrastructure are violating the human rights of people around the world, are violating the rights of other nations. So Canada should not be a law breaker. We should be moving forward towards an economy where we can be proud of our economy, where we're not undermining the health and safety of our communities and of our youth. And unfortunately, the fossil fuel economy, Canada already has a massive fossil fuel economy. We should be looking at ways of transitioning that to clean energy, as opposed to doing the smoke and mirrors where we're pretending that these products are consistent with a stable climate, because they're not.
Okay, I'm going to put the phone numbers out once again, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733. You can also just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. See a lot of emails coming in as well, bctoday@cbc.ca. And if you're watching us on TikTok, do feel free to comment there as well. My guest is Andrew Gage, a staff lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law. You brought up the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and one other project that Danielle Smith repeatedly mentioned as well is the canceled Northern Gateway project. So this was a pipeline from Alberta to Kitimat. It was approved but faced significant opposition and ultimately canceled in 2016 after a federal court ruling. How do you compare the two?
I mean, the proposal seems to be very, very similar, and it has many of the same challenges in that it crosses the territories of a huge number of First Nations that have said that they don't want this type of project, that they're actively opposed to it. It has some of the same massive climate impacts, and I think it'll face much of the same opposition. In addition, in 2019, the Canadian government enacted the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, which actually banned the types of tanker traffic from the North Coast that Premier Smith is talking about. I think that if anything, it faces more of an uphill battle than the Northern Gateway pipeline did some years ago. But certainly, you know, yeah, challenge after challenge that she would have to overcome. I think the Premier of BC is correct that it's a bit of a pipe dream at this point.
One of the challenges will be making sure there's consultation, because that was what the federal ruling was, right? That there was not adequate. It ruled that there was inadequate consultation with First Nations. She seems to be sending the message that they are trying to get ahead of that now. She reiterated that her Indigenous Affairs Minister reached out to First Nations. These are conversations they want to have early on to ensure that there is that consultation, not just about ticking a box or getting benefit agreements, but it was about consultation. And I will note that there is a First Nations group in Alberta that is in favor of an oil and gas development, pushing for a pipeline. They call it Northern Gateway 2.0. So is it really going to be as much of a challenge, I guess, when it comes to First Nations consultation? It seems to be that she's trying to address that head on.
The First Nations whose territory the pipeline goes through, and those that are affected downstream from it, will have to make their own decisions on their positions, of course. But with the Northern Gateway pipeline, over 100 First Nations signed the Save the Fraser Declaration. There was a broad swath of opposition to it. And the coastal First Nations, who were a key part of that conversation, have already signaled that they're opposed to this new proposal. In addition, I think the courts have moved on from where they were a few years ago, and we're seeing more and more lawsuits being brought by youth and by First Nations leaders and others challenging governments for not doing enough on climate change. And as I mentioned, the International Court of Justice, the highest court in the world, recently gave a lot of support to that particular view. So I think you're likely to see a whole new set of legal challenges as the case goes forward. Because what the International Court of Justice said is we can't just deal with our own emissions. We also have to recognize we're producing products, oil and gas, and in case of other industries, coal, and that's part of creating the climate crisis, causing the climate crisis. Causing the wildfires we've seen across Canada, causing the heat dome in 2021 that caused deaths, over 600 deaths here in BC. We cannot expect our communities to really have a stable future, a stable climate, and our children to have their rights protected while building out these types of massive, these projects that increase climate change on a huge scale.
Andrew Gage, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you asking me. Thanks.
Andrew Gage is a staff lawyer with West Coast Environmental Law. And over to you now, taking your calls on this. What do you make of Alberta's proposal for a bitumen pipeline to BC's coast? What do you think of the position that BC Premier David Eby has taken? And what place do you think pipelines have in BC's future? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Roman is calling us from Port Alberni. Hi, Roman.
Good afternoon. Quite an interesting topic today.
Sure is. Yeah. What are your thoughts on this proposal?
Well, first I'm going to say that I'm speaking from a point of conjecture, and I understand that there's more to learn. That being said, it'll be important to recognize the potential of this being pushed using Bill C-5 as the juggernaut that'll get it past all of these supposed impasses that would otherwise be known as checks and balances, to keep this in a place that it will not spill over, pun intended, into opportunities and protect the environment and the resources and the animals and the birds as they should be. And finally, I'd like to say, for the position of BC, I appreciate the position of it being not necessarily confrontational, but protecting our interest as a province, that we have to band together the way First Nations people have had to band together, create a unified voice, create a unified action, create a unified force that opposes this in a way that it's done right, if it ever is to be done. And that's the only way it can be accepted. And then I wanted to draw the parallels between this using what appears to be Bill C-5 pressure to push things through despite any opposition at the provincial, at the regional, at the local levels.
To fast-track nation-building projects, what are considered nation-building projects. And Roman, thank you for your call from Port Alberni. Let's head up to Smithers now, and Blair is calling us from there. Hi, Blair. What are your thoughts on this proposed pipeline through the north of the province to the coast?
Well, good afternoon, Michelle. Just to let you know that, Smithers is on the proposed route of the Northern Gateway. And at one point, there was over a dozen pipelines proposed, including Northern Gateway. And the previous caller and Andrew stole some of my thunder, but I kind of get the feeling that Premier Smith is trying to pull a fast one here to resurrect, a failed project. And remind everybody that, Kinder Morgan was bought by the federal government largely to appease her. And it ended up in a 4 times over cost overrun from the original estimate of $9 million. And it ended up with a taxpayer bailout.
Right. And Blair, I'm just going back to what she said yesterday. I think you listened to the program yesterday as well. And she started off by talking about what was lost with those programs that in terms of revenue, with the pipelines that were not approved or canceled, what was lost in terms of revenue. And there was this wealth that was waiting to be taken out of the ground and that kind of thing. So what do you take from that then?
Well, I'd say lost for who? For them, maybe not us. And just to let you know, I was living in Calgary in 1981 when the oil industry collapsed. And she likes to point fingers and blame everyone else, but the Alberta government, they brought it on themselves at that time. And what they did was that they dropped their royalties hugely to the point where they were getting much less for every barrel. And they essentially didn't listen to Peter Lougheed, who was their, mentor. His suggestion was to develop the oil sands, or tar sands as we called them at the time, slowly, and keep the revenues and royalties as high as possible. And the Alberta government later chose to do the exact opposite, and they brought it on themselves. They squandered their heritage fund. If they'd done what they should have, they'd be in the position of Norway, not some South American country. And I can just say one last thing. I'll let you go. That I say both Andrew and the previous caller kind of stole my thunder a bit, but impression I get, I have a hard time listening to Danielle Smith. We bought her a pipeline once. She's trying to pull a fag another one. She reminds me of the 9-year-old girl who got the pony she asked for and complained because it was the wrong color.
All right. Well, that's a kind of a personal comment on her there. But I take your point in terms of what you take from the proposal itself. Blair, thank you very much from Smithers. Sunny is on the line from Surrey now. Hi, Sunny.
Hi, how are you today?
I am fine. Thanks for calling. What are your thoughts on this plan in Alberta?
I think it's a good initiative. At least she started something, and now Mark Carney should, because this is good for development of our economy, and Mark Carney should step in and work with both the province to build this. You see, we are buying the oil from Washington, D.C. now. Like, we should stop buying the oil from United States and use our local resources, right? So the oil is going from Alberta to Houston. There is a refinery there. They are processing it, and they are selling back to us again. So it's coming back to us from Washington, right? So we should be also looking for building some kind of short-term refineries, because oil not going to be phased out soon. It will be transit slowly from the market.
Okay. Sunny, thank you very much for the call. Sandy on Galiano Island. Good afternoon. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I'm very upset by this whatever Danielle Smith is trying to do. But I was fortunate enough to get up to the Great Bear Sea this summer. And it's absolutely beautiful and pristine. And, I met with whale researchers who are listening to how humpbacks communicate. And we met with people in Kitimat. And in that community, the LNG is, which is going to be expanded as one of the 5 first projects, is choking their air shed. Like the air is messed up there for people living there. And then 2 weeks ago, we heard about a BC ferry, one of the northern routes, ferries that struck a humpback whale. Mm-hmm. So, and we went down, the channel where the former Queen of the North ran aground. And this is where they want to transport oil? Way. Absolutely no way.
Okay, so in terms of that tanker ban.
Mark Carney, I'm very upset about, the only thing Carney is saying that, or his minister, is that, there has to be some kind of carbon capture project undertaken before they okay anything in terms of oil pipeline. And David Eby, I don't know. I think he should be more forceful. I don't think the LNG is the answer either. There's not one nation-building project that's solar or wind or anything else. And who died yesterday? The greatest conservationist of this, this century, Jane Goodall. So I invite people to listen to what she had to say. We have to do better for our children, and this is not the way to do it.
Sandy, thank you very much for your call as well. Again, our email, bctoday@cbc.ca if you want to weigh in. And our TikTok Live is up as well, so you can leave a comment there. Again, our number is 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. Taking your calls. What place do pipelines have in BC's future? This is BC Today. Now, over in Ottawa, federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre chimed in on the plan, casting the spotlight on the Prime Minister. Poilievre says the project will be a key indicator of Carney's ability to deliver on campaign promises to build, and that the Prime Minister is the one standing in the way of the project and not provincial politicians.
I think it's a litmus test for Mark Carney. There was a lot of grandiose promises by Mr. Carney during the election that he would build, baby, build faster than you'd ever imagined we could build. So when is this building going to happen? Here we are, 6 months after he took office, and the new Liberal government looks an awful lot like the old Liberal government. The last 6 months looks an awful lot like the last 10 years, where they block, baby, block. So there's only one person who will decide if this pipeline gets built, and it's Mark Carney. So I would encourage you all to ignore provincial politicians who have no authority in this matter. Like, the reality is the federal government has the full authority over interprovincial pipelines. So there's one man who stands in the way of this pipeline getting built. It's Mark Carney. If the Liberals want it built, they will immediately repeal the tanker ban so the pipe can fill a ship that goes abroad, the production cap so that our producers can make enough oil to go in the pipe, and C-69 so that the pipe can get rapidly approved. Mark Carney really only has to do one thing: get out of the way.
And some more of your emails now. Dave wrote us yesterday, the majority by far want pipelines built. Eby is not being logical. He should be all in on these projects, no matter who's putting up the money. Thank you for your email. Kristen writes, it's disheartening to think that a northern pipeline can be considered by any Canadian. We should not risk what is left of our nation's beauty. It is 12:30 now. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I see a lot of emails coming in on this as well. And we'll go to a couple more of your calls coming up in our next half hour. I know Peter is waiting in South Slocan and Renee in Victoria. We'll go to you in a couple of moments. And then we'll talk about real estate in Metro Vancouver. 2,500 newly built condos sitting empty and unsold. So given this glut, what does it mean for the market? What do you think is behind it? We'll ask you if it's making buying a condo more attainable. What does it mean to you? We'll take your calls on that as well coming up after the 12:30 news. Right now, it is time for the 12:30 CBC News Update.
Good afternoon. Analysts with CIBC say political and economic realities may be difficult to overcome for Alberta Premier Danielle Smith as she pushes for the development of a new bitumen pipeline ending on BC's coast. The analysts say in a report they are doubtful of the eventual success of the pipeline plan. Smith says her government is putting up $14 million for planning work, hoping the private sector would take over. The latest BC homeless count shows 12 of the 20 communities surveyed have seen an increase in unhoused residents since the last report 2 years ago. The Housing Ministry says the numbers show a continued overrepresentation of Indigenous people and those who were formerly in foster care. And more homes were listed for sale in Metro Vancouver last month, with Greater Vancouver realtors saying it has put some downward pressure on prices. The group says the composite benchmark price for residential properties last month was $1.14 million, down 3.2% from the same time last year. And now the forecast on the North Coast. Increasing cloudiness this afternoon with a high of 13, highs up to 15 and clearing in the Peace. In the central interior, including Prince George, a mix of sun and cloud with a high of 15, highs up to 18 and mainly cloudy this afternoon in the Kootenays. In the southern interior, including Kelowna, mainly cloudy with a high of 18 as well. And for Metro Vancouver, Greater Victoria and the Fraser Valley, rain and showers tapering off, then cloudy with highs from 15 to 19. That's your CBC News update from Vancouver.
Thank you, Rob. That is Rob Zimmerman in the CBC Vancouver newsroom. Welcome back. You're with BC Today here on CBC. I'm Michelle Elliott. Very nice to have you with us this afternoon. We're going to take a couple more calls as we have been discussing the proposal from Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith, saying her province is going to spend $14 million to design a plan for a pipeline from Alberta to BC's North Coast. Now, at this time, there is no private proponent, but she says that given this plan, they're going to take it to the Prime Minister and the federal office looking at these projects and hoping for a private backer. Then we're asking you what your thoughts are on this proposal and BC's stance on it as well. What role do you think pipelines have in BC's future? So let's take some more of your calls. Anthony on the line in Coquitlam. Hi, go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Bottom line is pipelines are the safest way to move oil compared to rail. We don't need another Lake Megantic. If we sell our natural resources to the world, we have tax revenue which funds our healthcare, our public education, social systems. With a strong economy, we'll have strong healthcare, strong public education, and stronger social safety nets for all of society, because right now a lot of people are in trouble. My bottom line here is if you don't get the foreign investment in, and I would invest in a pipeline because it's good for the country's economy. And if people here don't think we need pipelines, then they should give up their medical services card and not send their kids to public school, because guess who's paying for all that?
Anthony, thank you for the call and referring there to Lac Mégantic, which was the train derailment in Quebec many years ago. Thank you for your call. And let's head now to Peter in South Slocan. Hi, Peter.
Oh, hi there, Michelle. Thank you very much for taking my call. I want to oppose what the previous couple of speakers have said in favor of this process. $14 million to design a plan to move oil from Alberta, taxpayers' money. My goodness, I'd be mad. If I was a young person, I'm 85. If I was a young person today, I'd be so mad at the ruling classes that I think I'd be rioting. So much is wrong in what's going on today. We need to wean ourselves from fossil fuels as fast as we can. The environment is in an extremely rapidly deteriorating and increasingly rapidly deteriorating condition. And if we keep burning fossil fuels the way we are, I think we're up the pole. We're mad as a species. Okay. I could rant on.
Peter, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your call. I think I got the gist of it. Renee is on the line in Victoria. Hi, Renee. Thanks for waiting.
Michelle, thank you. This is a really bad economic and an ecological idea, and the economy is horrendous. We already are in debt with the Trans Mountain for $34 billion. We have a pipeline. We don't own any oil. So this is a disaster, and we've got a tanker ban. We have salmon that are under threat, whales that are under threat. Our whole marine environment is more or less under threat from climate change. So we're putting a lot of stuff at risk. For what? We don't own our oil. Like Saudi Arabia is state-owned. They own all the oil. Norway, we own, and I understand Premier Smith's desperation because Imperial Oil is laying off a bunch of people in Calgary, and Imperial Oil is 69% owned by ExxonMobil, which is an international company based in Texas. And they are laying off worldwide. So we're always going to be boom, bust with this oil. So we need to, for climate change reasons and the economy, we need to get off this boom and bust cycle. It makes no economic sense. We're already in debt, $34 billion with this Trans Mountain pipeline that we got stuck with. And so we're going to get stuck with more. And for what? And our healthcare system is failing. It doesn't trickle down anywhere. The transnationals own it. They
Renee,
get the profit.
Thank you very much for your call. One last email from Phil, who writes, interesting detail within Danielle Smith's proposal. She acknowledged the carbon capture opportunities in Alberta. It makes sense to me that Canada go ahead with the carbon capture project, but not begin a long-term pipeline project that ships bitumen offshore through a fragile environment. Phil, thank you. BC Today at cbc.ca. Thank you for all of your calls. Really appreciate hearing from you on that. Right now it is 12:37. Stay with us here on BC Today. Now, there is a comedy show that reflects the exciting time for Hindi comedy right here in Vancouver. Indian comedian Zakir Khan is performing 2 shows tomorrow at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre. He's a huge star in the comedy scene with a global following of more than 8 million subscribers on YouTube. And later today, CBC British Columbia will have a special live event. This is at 4 o'clock, and Khan will sit down with Early Edition host Stephen Quinn. On site will be 2 fans who talked on the Early Edition this morning about their excitement. They are Grace Glory Mani and Netra Rao.
Really honored that I have been selected for this event. I have been following him closely since quite a while now, and he's someone whom I find instantly relatable. And I think that what makes him stand out is how deeply he values his relationships, whether it's romantic, friendships, or even family ties. You know, he carries the warmth and familiarity and relatability of everyday life. So I'm just excited to meet him in person.
And how about you, Netra?
Yeah, very similar to that. It kind of feels like I'm meeting a family member, though we are nowhere related, just because you've known him for so long, and because his stories are so relatable, right? So it's a really too good to be true moment, especially today afternoon, getting to meet him.
All right. I hope they have a great time. We will stream Zakir Khan live in conversation with CBC News. That's on cbc.ca/BC, as well as our CBC BC TikTok and on YouTube at CBC British Columbia. It's 12:40 now. You're with BC Today. Well, to real estate now, and about 2,500 newly built condos are sitting unsold and empty across Metro Vancouver. That's according to Canada Mortgage Housing Corporation. And the CMHC says that number is double what it was last year. CBC reporter Amelia John spoke with real estate agent Oleg Galyuk with Royal Pacific Realty. He said there are specific issues with new builds.
Yeah, I think the developers put all their eggs into the investor basket, maybe a little bit too much. And right now, a lot of condos coming online that people don't really want to live in. And a lot of investors have exited the market, especially in the last couple of years. I don't think it's a brand new phenomenon. Essentially, ever since the interest rates got raised, a lot of investors started exiting the market.
And meanwhile, executives in the industry are warning about what that could mean. Anne McMullen is president and CEO of the Urban Development Institute, and she blames development cost charges and regulations making building more expensive.
What is happening right now in the condo market is that the cost of building homes is costing more than the average person can afford. Costs have escalated so much in the last 10 years that to build a unit is out of the price range of 80% of the public in the Metro Vancouver area.
Love to hear from you on this. What do you think is the impact of these new condo units struggling to sell? Is the availability of new condos making the market more attainable? Or what's keeping buyers away? You can call us now, 1-800-825-5950, 604-669-3733, or just hit pound 690 on your cell phone. Again, we're watching your comments on our TikTok Live and on our email, bctoday@cbc.ca. I'm joined now by Brendon Ogmundson, the chief economist for the BC Real Estate Association. Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us.
Great to be here. Thanks.
Are you surprised by this number?
No, it's something we've been tracking ourselves. Obviously, the market's been a lot weaker than expected in 2025, largely because we got hit with a totally unexpected uncertainty shock at the start of this year due to tariffs, and that's really upended the kind of demand conditions we thought we were going to have, and as a result, no surprise, we're seeing on the new inventory side, things are piling up.
And why is it that it's specifically the new inventory that seems to be struggling?
Yeah, it's not just on the new side. We have high inventory on the sell side as well. But it's a product of the way our kind of construction cycles work. A lot of the units that are completing were kind of developed 5-6 years ago as an idea, maybe got permit through 2-3 years, sometimes longer for construction. So they were kind of developed or conceived in a very different market than they're completing. They're completing into a market that has a foreign buyer ban, that has a lot of new rules around tenants that make it less attractive to be an investor, and into a market where demand conditions are just way different than expected.
Right. And when you look at this, Brendon, what are the concerns that are raised for you?
There's sort of short-term and longer-term concerns. So short-term, it just makes it very difficult, obviously, for developers to start new projects. So if you've got a lot of inventory, 2,500 units that need to be sold, it's just going to delay a lot of other projects that we need to get going in order to keep the kind of pipeline of housing supply at levels we need. Longer term, that means that if we have a real slowdown in starts over the next few years, we're not going to come anywhere close to hitting supply targets that both the province would like to see or the federal government would like to see with their CMHC targets. And that means we're more susceptible to having the types of decade like we just had, where we had very, very low supply and rapidly accelerating prices and really deteriorating affordability.
Is there something that you think needs to be done then at this point?
We really need to get the demand side going again. So we can't have, the way that we build in BC is if we're going to build condos, they are about 2/3 need to be pre-sold to investors. Or if we're building purpose-built rental, it's funded either by the CMHC or institutional money, pension funds and REITs. We need to get the demand side going. So if we want more ownership condos, we need to figure out how we're going to make it more attractive for people to buy pre-sales. The only way to do that, I think, is generally all the things that are holding back the economy, uncertainty, maybe some higher than higher interest rates, a very slow growing economy. All of those things kind of need to be addressed to make the investor climate more attractive. And we also probably need to address some of the regulations, foreign buyer ban. I know it's very unpopular to say, but we should be allowing foreign capital at least to buy new homes or invest in pre-sales to fund this construction, and generally need to make it more attractive to be an investor in this province.
Yeah, I'll ask you about that because you're right. That is certainly controversial. There's a debate around it now. We see more calls, right, for an increase in foreign investment given the limits that have been placed, but opposition to that as well. So I'll follow up with you on that. My guest, Brendon Ogmundson, Chief Economist for the BC Real Estate Association. We're talking about, that slowing market, and now we're seeing a glut of newly built condos sitting unsold, and 2,500 according to the CMHC. Asking you, does that make the condo market more attainable perhaps? Or what is keeping you, if you're a buyer, potential buyer, what's keeping you away? Our number is 604-669-3733, 1-800-825-5950. And you can hit pound 690. Interested as well, if you work in construction and engineering, what is the impact on your industry from this right now? Let's take some calls now. Thanks very much for calling in. We have Frank on the line first up. Hi, Frank, joining us from Vancouver. Welcome.
Hiya. Hello?
Hi there. What are your thoughts on new condos going unsold, 2,500 right now in Metro Vancouver?
I kind of like it because I think that the government should be more responsible for development than developers, because they're just trying to make a profit and turn over crap. Like I bought a condo 2 years ago, and it felt like a small prison cell, and it wasn't really well thought out. You couldn't open doors and use certain areas. You couldn't fit a bed in and open the door in the bedroom. And if that's the sort of things new developers are developing and using the building code as their benchmark, and that's supposed to be a minimum, not really the benchmark for what a quality unit is, then I'm glad to see them suffer a little.
What have you done with your condo since?
We sold it. I ended up having a good year at work, and we sold it and moved into a much older townhouse.
Okay.
A small townhouse, 2-bedroom, same size almost. Well, not size, but same bedroom.
Are you happier with it?
Oh, God, yes. And then I renovated it, and now it's beautiful. We have so much space. We have a garage instead of a tiny storage locker and a shared garage where they allotted us like a tiny parking stall, and you couldn't even get a regular stall because the developer wanted to keep those to sell separately.
So when you hear, Frank, you're talking about the layouts with new condos, and something we've heard from realtors is that because of the target market, which was investors, that they are not necessarily considered appealing for those who actually want to live in them. Is that your view?
Yeah, that was my experience, and I felt like at the time the market was at its peak, so I overpaid, and I was just in such a rush to get into the market, fearing that it would never dip again, that I accepted the layout as it was because I felt like there was no other option.
Tale as old as time. I think I've certainly heard that story. Frank, thank you very much for your call. Good to hear from you. Thanks for sharing your personal story there. Todd in Chilliwack. And Todd, you wanted to comment on what this might mean for renters.
Hi.
Hi there. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, okay. One question. Was listening to Brendon there and stuff while I was on hold. Mm-hmm. How many of there's 2,500 condos that are still not sold. How many sold ones are still sitting empty? Right.
Okay.
So you got 2,500 that are sitting not sold. How many are sold but still empty because nobody can afford to rent them because of the pandemic came? And if we look in history, which I saw on your show, your channel, CBC, a show about how every time we have a pandemic or anything, a disruption in the world like that, what happens? The prices of everything double. Exactly like what happened here. I live in an apartment in Chilliwack. My rent is, quick numbers, $700 a month. The elderly lady across the hall pays double that for the same unit, exact same unit. Mine flip-flopped over the other side of the hallway, double the price. Yeah. Why? Because when the pipeline came through, after your last show segment there, when the pipeline came through, right, when we sold the pipeline and bought all that, the same company that owns pipeline companies and everything else moved to British Columbia, bought a whole bunch of apartments, 9 in Chilliwack alone, then moved to Abbotsford, another 9, 10, I'm not sure, then moved to Langley, another 7, 8, Surrey, Burnaby, on and on. They bought them all. Same company is under the umbrella of companies for pipelines.
And by the time your neighbor moved in...
No, what happened is the person there got kicked out,
Yeah.
and the new lady moved in,
Yeah.
and the Main Street Equity decided to double the price.
Right, that's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
Some of our provinces did not allow that to happen. The unit is what gets the 2.5% per year raise only. You can't they just willy-nilly and raised it, doubled it, basically.
Okay, Todd, thank you very much. The limit on increases is for year per year, right? When it comes to people living within that rental unit and not when it changes hands. Let's go to David in Vancouver now. Hi, David.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead. Are you
okay.
Yeah.
I just drove into the parkade in my condo.
Okay.
I'm in Kitsilano, and we're putting a new roof on our building. Not this morning; it's a little rainy out, but the bill for that is about $1.5 million. So it comes out to be anywhere from 12 to 16,000 per unit. Now that's going to be all tacked onto it for people that want to sell. I don't know where that's going to end. I mean, it's an older condo, but it's quite nice and it's fairly roomy. We've got about 950 square feet.
Yeah.
And so I noticed there's 3 places for sale now.
Right.
And they're all up around about $1 million for 900 square feet. I don't know where that's going to end. I just really don't.
Yeah.
I don't know who's going.
Do you have a sense of how long they've been listed for?
One of them only a week.
Okay.
One of them for about a year.
A year.
So, yeah. And it's rented out now because of the market. They don't want to. They want to sell. They moved to Alberta, and so they're going to wait it out.
Yeah, that's really interesting, David. Thank you so much for your call. I'm going to go back to Brendon on that. Yeah, what do you think? We've heard of a couple of examples of different experiences with rent now, but that idea that, okay, here's a unit that wasn't selling, so they turned it into a rental. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, that's happening also on the development side. If developers can't hit pre-sale marks, but can then convert to a purpose-built rental, especially with cheaper financing from the CMHC, we're certainly seeing some of that happen as well. It's we're building a fair amount of rental. We're going to have probably more rental units completed over the next decade than at any time, maybe since the 70s. So fortunately, we're starting to address the rental side of things. And given what's happening on the immigration side as well, especially with international students and temporary foreign workers, with government targets to reduce those numbers, we could have higher vacancy rates and perhaps some downward pressure on rents coming over the next few years.
And let me go back to your point earlier about perhaps a need now to revisit restrictions on foreign investment. We've heard this argument. I've heard it repeatedly now. In light of the slowing market, what do you make of concerns then that that's what got us here in the first place? Is house prices being driven up by foreign investment displacing local residents?
So if you look at the government target, the BC government would like to complete about 600,000 units over the next decade. We currently average about 30,000 completions per year. So it's about 300,000 more units of housing than we would build otherwise. To do so might require something like $200 to $300 billion over the 10-year period just for the construction financing, because we have very expensive, we have a cost of delivery crisis, so it's very expensive to build. Where we're going to source that capital from is an open question that I haven't really heard the government address. It can't be addressed by government. $30 billion a year is about half or a third of the current provincial budget, and so it needs to come from somewhere. So it's not all going to be coming from domestic sources. That's too much capital to raise. So we're probably going to have to be able to tap international sources. And we're not saying allow foreign or non-residents to buy whatever they want. Australia has similar rules where non-residents can buy pre-sales, you can invest in new housing. As long as it's not empty, I'm not really sure why we would have an issue.
You bring up Australia. Our next caller actually would like to talk about Australia or other models as well. And Kelly is calling from Ladysmith. Hi, Kelly.
Hi there.
Yeah, go ahead. What you want to say about the real estate market right now?
Sure. Well, everybody knows that wages across Canada have not kept pace with the cost of housing coast to coast to coast. So we really need to look to other markets. In Australia, I believe it's a 2-year period. If you can prove that you can pay rent at any amount for 2 years, you can then qualify for a mortgage of that same amount. So we really need to look at how the banks in Canada are currently operating, because they are bankrupting the country by operating the way they currently are. And the young people are not benefiting from anything that they are currently doing. We really need to look to other models around the world that are successful in getting everybody into a house that they own. And it also solves the housing crisis as well as the housing market and the unhoused.
Kelly, thank you very much. I will go quickly to Brendon for that. The idea of renting to own, I guess. How feasible is that?
We've seen some. I know Anthem, one of the developers, a large developer in Vancouver, has that kind of program. So we're seeing developers, who have these inventories, trying to come up with creative ways to reduce that inventory. And one of them is like a rent to own type program. So those exist. I'm not sure what the uptake is, but we are seeing some creativity.
Very good to speak with you on this. Clearly, our audience has a significant interest in this topic. I really appreciate your analysis on this today. Thank you for your time.
You bet. Everyone loves to talk about housing.
They sure do. Again, tale as old as time. That's Brendon Ogmundson, Chief Economist for the BC Real Estate Association.